The Great Hall of the Galactic Union fell silent. 2,000 representatives from 127 species sat frozen in their seats. No one moved. No one spoke. Many did not even breathe. High Admiral Zahn, the 7-foot-tall, blue-skinned leader of the Union Council, looked around the room with all 4 of his eyes. His voice, normally strong and sure, now trembled. I ask again, which species will volunteer for the black hole mission? The fate of billions hangs in the balance. The silence grew deeper. Some representatives looked at the floor. Others stared at the massive hologram floating in the center of the hall. A swirling, angry mass of light being pulled into darkness. The supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy had become unstable. Scientists gave them 6 months before the waves of destruction would begin to reach populated worlds. In the back row, Captain Tai-Ho Kim of Earth sat straight in his chair. Humans had only joined the Galactic Union 80 years ago. Most species still saw them as newcomers, barely out of their primitive phase. Earth had just 1 vote in the council, and little power. Tai-Ho watched as the representatives of the Voltar, famous for their warrior culture, studied their tablets intently, avoiding eye contact. The Zith, who often boasted of their self-sacrifice, suddenly found the ceiling very interesting. Even the Droon, who had built their reputation on taking risks, sat motionless. The mission parameters are clear, continued Admiral Zahn. A ship must approach the black hole and deploy the stabilization array within the outer edge of the event horizon. Our scientists have confirmed this is the only solution. What he didn't need to say, what everyone already knew, was that any ship crossing the event horizon would not return. Physics made that clear. This was a one-way trip. We have the technology, said Zahn. We just need a crew willing to fly it. Tai-Ho felt a tap on his arm. It was Suho Bai, his assistant and friend. The sub-council is meeting, whispered Suho. Emergency session, humans not invited. Tai-Ho nodded. This wasn't surprising. Despite being union members, humans were often left out of the most important discussions. He got up quietly and followed Suho out of the main hall. In the corridor, Suho pulled up a small device. I placed a listening bug under the table last week, just in case. They found an empty meeting room and listened in on the sub-council's secret session. We cannot wait for volunteers, said the gravelly voice of Drax, the Voltar commander. We must select a species and order them to provide a crew. My thoughts exactly, said another voice. The logical choice would be one of the newer members, species that haven't contributed as much to the Union. The humans, perhaps, suggested a third voice. They're still finding their place, and they reproduce quickly. They can afford the loss. Tai-Ho felt his face grow hot with anger. Before Suho could stop him, he was walking back toward the main hall, his mind made up. The Great Hall was still silent when he returned. Admiral Zahn was about to dismiss the meeting when Tai-Ho stepped forward. Earth volunteers, he said, his voice carrying across the quiet room. Every head turned toward him. A murmur spread through the hall like a wave. Captain Kim, said Admiral Zahn, surprise clear in his voice. You speak for Earth in this matter? I do, said Tai-Ho, though he had no authority to make such a promise. He would deal with his superiors later. Humanity will provide the crew for the black hole mission. The murmurs grew louder. A tall, thin representative of the Zith stood up. The human doesn't understand what he's volunteering for, said the Zith. They are too young a species. They don't grasp the finality of death as we do. Tai-Ho smiled. We understand death very well. We just don't fear it the way you do. This caused an uproar. Several representatives stood shouting at once. Admiral Zahn had to bang his staff 3 times to restore order. Captain Kim, said Zahn when the noise died down. This mission means certain death. No return is possible once the event horizon is crossed. Are you certain about this? I am, said Tai-Ho, and I will personally lead the mission. The room erupted again. In the confusion, an older representative with long silver hair approached Tai-Ho. It was Alara, from the ancient Terran species. Why would you do this? She asked quietly. Your people are just beginning your journey among the stars. Taiho looked her in the eye. Because we can, and because someone must. Back on the Earth ship, Suho confronted Taiho in his quarters. You had no right to volunteer our species, Suho said, pacing back and forth. Earth Command will never approve this. Taiho sat calmly at his desk, already drafting a message to his superiors. They will, because the alternative is to look weak in front of the entire Union. It's suicide, said Suho. Maybe, said Taiho, but I have an idea. He pulled up a file on his screen labeled Project Lazarus, a theoretical technology that Earth scientists had been working on in secret. The other species think they know everything about black holes, said Taiho, but they've never been willing to risk getting close enough to test their theories. We have. The next day, Taiho stood before the full Union Council. Admiral Zahn had called a special session to formalize Earth's commitment. Representatives from all species watched with a mixture of relief and guilt as Taiho signed the official documents. Earth will provide a ship and crew, said Taiho. We require only that we use our own vessel and equipment. Granted, said Admiral Zahn quickly, before anyone could object. The mission must launch within 30 days. The black hole's instability is increasing faster than predicted. As Taiho left the chamber, representatives from various species approached him. Some offered thanks, others seemed confused. Your species is stranger than we thought, said the Voltar Commander Drax, to go so willingly toward death. We don't see it as going toward death, said Taiho. We see it as running toward life. The lives we'll save. That evening, as Taiho prepared to return to Earth to begin preparations, he received a visitor. Tiu was Ilara, the Terran elder. I am 512 years old, she said when Taiho invited her in. I have seen many species join the Union. None have surprised me as much as humans. Is that a compliment? Asked Taiho. I'm not sure, she admitted. But I think, she hesitated. I think you might have a plan. Something you're not telling the council. Taiho kept his face neutral. What makes you think that? Because I've studied your history, said Ilara. Humans never simply accept no-win scenarios. You always look for another way. Taiho smiled, but said nothing. Whatever you're planning, said Ilara as she left, I hope it works. The Union needs species like yours, ones who still believe impossible things can happen. 3 days later, Taiho's ship broke orbit and headed back to Earth. He had 30 days to assemble a crew, prepare a ship, and figure out how to do the impossible, to dive into a black hole and somehow return to tell about it. As Earth grew larger in the view screen, Taiho thought about the task ahead. The other species were right about one thing. It would take a special kind of crew for this mission. People willing to face the unknown and stare into darkness itself. Luckily, he knew just where to find them. The Korean Space Agency headquarters in Seoul buzzed with activity. News of Captain Taiho Kim's promise to the Galactic Union had spread quickly. Some called him a hero, others called him a fool. The Earth government had been angry at first, but when they saw how the other species now looked at humans with new respect, they changed their minds. Taiho stood at the window of his office, looking out at the city skyline. The door opened, and Suho walked in. Earth Command has approved the mission, said Suho, placing a tablet on the desk. They're calling it Operation Event Horizon. Taiho nodded. And Project Lazarus? Also approved, but kept secret from the Union. Dr. Minji Park has been working on it for 3 years. She's already here. Good. Bring her in. A few minutes later, a woman in her late 30s entered the office. Dr. Minji Park had sharp eyes and moved with quick, precise steps. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Captain Kim, she said with a small bow, I hear you're planning to dive into a black hole. That's right, said Taiho. And I need a physicist who specializes in extreme gravity environments. Minji raised an eyebrow. You need someone who can help you survive the impossible. Can your project do that? Minji walked to the window. Project Lazarus is theoretical. We've never tested it in real conditions. The basic idea is to create a temporal dilation field that might allow a ship to deploy equipment inside the event horizon and then slingshot back out before being crushed. But the other species say that's impossible, said Suho. They say that because they've never tried, said Minji. They've studied black holes from a safe distance for thousands of years. We've been studying them for less than 200, but we're willing to take risks they won't. Taiho smiled. Will you join the mission, Dr. Park? Minji looked him in the eye. I've spent my life studying black holes. How could I pass up the chance to see one up close? She extended her hand. I'm in. Over the next week, Taiho and Minji assembled the rest of the crew. They needed the best, but also people who would say yes to a mission that might be one way. Dr. Jun Lee was next. The engineer was working in his lab when they found him, surrounded by complex equipment and holographic displays. His hair was messy and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. I need someone who understands temporal mechanics, said Taiho. Jun didn't look up from his work. You need someone to build Dr. Park's crazy machine. You know about Project Lazarus? Asked Minji, surprised. Now Jun looked up, grinning. I helped design part of it. The temporal field generator is based on my research. He stood up. When do we leave? Next came Hyun Kang, a pilot who had won fame for his daring rescue missions. During the asteroid mining accident 3 years earlier, he had saved 16 lives by flying into an unstable debris field. The black hole mission, said Hyun when Taiho explained why they had come. Everyone's talking about it. He was tall and lean, with steady hands and calm eyes. They say it's suicide. It might be, admitted Taiho. But we have a plan that might work. Hyun considered this. Will it be the hardest piloting job ever attempted? Without question. Then I want in, said Hyun. Besides, someone needs to bring you all back. Alive, Dr. Song Yoon joined next. The xenobiologist was studying exotic life forms on Europa when they called her. She had made her name researching organisms that survived in extreme conditions. A black hole is the most extreme environment in the universe, she said when they had out. If there's any chance of survival, I want to document it. Her eyes shone with excitement. Besides, no one has ever recorded scientific data from inside an event horizon. The final member of the core team was Do-Yun Choi, a communications expert who had pioneered new methods of quantum signaling. He was young, only 26, but brilliant. Traditional communications won't work near a black hole, he explained during his interview. But I've been developing a quantum entanglement system that might maintain contact even under extreme gravity. He pushed his glasses up. It's never been tested in those conditions, but you want to be the first? Finished Taiho. Do-Hyun nodded, eagerly. With the team assembled, they had only 2 weeks to prepare. The ship they would use, now named Prometheus, was being fitted with special equipment in orbit. Most importantly, Minji and Jun were installing the experimental Lazarus system. 3 days before their scheduled departure, a Union ship arrived. It carried 4 observers from different species, sent to assist and monitor the mission preparation. Everyone knew they were really there to make sure the humans went through with their promise. The head observer was Zex, a tall, gray-skinned member of the ancient Zolaxian species. He watched the humans with all 3 of his eyes, constantly taking notes. Your crew seems cheerful, said Zex to Taiho as they watched the team running simulations. Do they understand this is likely a one-way journey? They understand the risks, said Taiho. They also understand the potential rewards. Rewards? Zex seemed confused. What reward could balance certain death? Taiho considered how to explain. Knowledge, discovery, the chance to see something no one has ever seen before, and the satisfaction of saving billions of lives. Zex shook his head. Strange priorities. Later that day, Zex approached Minji as she worked on calculations. Dr. Park, he said, may I ask why you volunteered for this mission? Minji looked up from her work. Because it's fascinating. Fascinating? To die? Death may be certain, said Minji with a small smile. but discovery is guaranteed. Zex recorded this statement in his notes, clearly puzzled. The night before launch, Taiho called a private meeting with just the 5 human crew members. They gathered in a secure room, free from Union observers. "Tomorrow we launch," said Taiho. "I need to know that you're all still committed, knowing what we face." "You mean the fact that no one has ever survived crossing an event horizon?" asked Hyun. "Or that the Lazarus system is completely untested," added Jun. "Or that the Union species think we're all going to die," said Songyi. Taiho nodded. "All of that. This is your last chance to back out. No one would blame you." The 5 crew members looked at each other. Then Minji spoke. "Captain, the other species have studied black holes for thousands of years, but they've always been too afraid to get close. Their fear has limited their understanding." She stood up. "We have a chance to learn what they never could. And maybe, just maybe, prove that the impossible is only impossible until someone does it." One by one, the others stood as well. "Besides," said Do-Yun with a grin, "can you imagine their faces if we actually come back?" The next morning, as the crew prepared to take the shuttle up to the Prometheus, a crowd gathered to see them off. Family members, friends, and colleagues came to say goodbye, some believing they would never see these 6 humans again. As they walked toward the shuttle in their flight suits, Zex and the other Union observers watched from a distance. "I do not understand humans," said Zex to his companions. They walked to their deaths with smiles on their faces. The smaller observer, a bird like Avarian, chirped softly. "Perhaps they know something we don't." Zex shook his head. "Impossible. Our species have studied black holes for eons. There is no way to return once the event horizon is crossed." The humans boarded their shuttle, waving to the crowd. As the doors closed, Taiho looked back at Earth one last time. "Ready?" he asked his crew. "Ready to make history," said Minji. The shuttle engines fired, and they began their journey up to orbit where the Prometheus waited. The mission to save the galaxy and perhaps rewrite the laws of physics had begun. The Prometheus broke Earth orbit with a flash of blue light. It was not the largest ship in the Union fleet, but it was one of the fastest. The sleek vessel had been rebuilt with special shielding to withstand the intense forces they would face. Inside the bridge, Taiho watched as Earth grew smaller in the view screen. Beside him, Hyun guided the ship with steady hands on the controls. The rest of the crew were at their stations, running final checks on all systems. "Course set for the galactic center," said Hyun. "Estimated travel time, 3 months. 3 months to prepare. 3 months to perfect their plan. 3 months until they would face the ultimate test." The Union observers had their own section of the ship, but Zex often came to the bridge to watch the humans work. He seemed puzzled by many things they did. "You brought music," he said one day, listening to the classical piece playing softly in the background, "and books and personal items. Why?" "Because we're still living," said Songyi, looking up from her station. "This is our home for the next 3 months. But after that," Zex paused. "After you reach the black hole?" "Even then," said Songyi, with a smile. "Life continues until it doesn't." The Zolaxian made a note on his tablet, clearly confused. As the days passed, the crew fell into a routine. Mornings were for system checks and maintenance. Afternoons were for training simulations. Evenings were for planning and discussion of the mission ahead. But the most important work happened late at night, when the Union observers were asleep. In the ship's main lab, Minji and Jun worked on Project Lazarus. "The temporal dilation field is stable in simulations," said Jun one night, showing Taiho the results on a screen. "But we've never tested it with the kind of gravity we'll encounter." "What are our chances?" asked Taiho. Minji and Jun looked at each other. "If everything works perfectly," said Minji, "maybe 30%. And realistically, 10%, admitted Jun. "But that's 10% better than the 0% chance everyone else thinks we have." Taiho nodded. "We'll take it." A month into their journey, they passed the last populated system on their route. A small fleet of Union ships met them there, led by Admiral Zahn's command vessel. The admiral requested to come aboard the Prometheus. When he arrived, the tall, blue-skinned leader seemed uncomfortable in the human ship. "Captain Kim," he said when they met in the conference room, "the Union Council wished me to convey their gratitude for your mission." "Their gratitude for our sacrifice, you mean?" said Taiho. Admiral Zahn looked away. "Yes, that." Taiho gestured to a chair. "Would you like to see what we're planning to do?" The admiral sat, and Taiho pulled up the mission plan on the screen. He showed how they would approach the black hole, deploy the stabilization array, and then... "And then what?" asked Admiral Zahn. "The Union scientists say nothing can escape once you cross the event horizon." "They may be right," said Taiho. "But we're going to try anyway." He didn't mention Project Lazarus, that was still their secret. Before Admiral Zahn left, he handed Taiho a small metal box. "The Council sent this for your crew. It contains medals, the highest honor the Union can bestow." Taiho took the box but didn't open it. "We'll accept these when we return, Admiral. Not before." After the Admiral's ship departed, the Prometheus continued its journey toward the center of the galaxy. Day by day, the stars ahead grew thicker, and the ship's sensors began to detect the massive gravitational pull that lay ahead. 2 months into the journey, Do-Yun made an interesting discovery. He had been monitoring the communications of the Union observers. "They've been reporting back to their governments," he told Taiho during a private meeting. "I translated some of their messages." "What are they saying?" asked Taiho. Do-Yun smiled. "They're fascinated by us, by humans. The Avarian observer told his people that we face death like it's just another adventure. The Zolaxian Zex reported that we display none of the expected fear responses." Taiho laughed. "They still don't understand us." "There's more," said Do-Hyun. "Some species are beginning to question their understanding of humans. The Voltar commander, the one who wanted to force us into this mission, has been asking for more information about Earth's history." "Good," said Taiho. "Maybe they'll finally start seeing us as equals." As they entered the 3rd month, the black hole began to appear on their long-range sensors. At first, it was just a dark spot against the stars, but as they drew closer, they could see the swirling disk of matter being pulled into it, glowing with intense heat and energy. "It's beautiful," whispered Songyi, as they all gathered on the bridge to look at the first visual images. "And deadly," added June. "The radiation levels are off the charts." Minji was studying the sensor readings with intense focus. "The instability is worse than the Union predicted. We don't have much time." A week later, they received a transmission from the Union fleet that had been monitoring the black hole from a safe distance. The message was from Admiral San. "Captain Kim, our scientists report the black hole's behavior is becoming more erratic. The destabilization is accelerating. You must deploy the array as soon as possible." Taiho called a meeting with his crew. "We're still 2 weeks out at our current speed. We can push the engines harder," said Hyun. "Get there in 1 week instead." "The ship wasn't designed for that kind of stress," warned June. "Neither was it designed to dive into a black hole," countered Hyun. "But here we are." They decided to increase speed. The Prometheus groaned and vibrated as its engines worked beyond their rated capacity. But the ship held together, bringing them closer to their destination each hour. 3 days before they reached the black hole, one of the Union observers discovered something. The Avarian, smallest of the 4 observers, had been exploring the ship and accidentally entered the lab where Project Lazarus was being built. "What is this device?" he asked Minji, who was working late. "It looks like a temporal manipulation system." Before Minji could answer, Zex entered the lab. The Zolaxian's 3 eyes widened when he saw the equipment. "You're building a temporal dilation field," he said, his voice rising. "This technology was deemed too dangerous by the Union Council centuries ago." "Deemed too dangerous or too difficult?" asked Minji calmly. Zex turned to face Taiho, who had just entered the room. "Captain Kim, explain this at once. Your mission is to deploy the stabilization array, not to experiment with forbidden technology." "Our mission is to save the galaxy," said Taiho, "and then to try to save ourselves." "This is why you volunteered," said Zex, understanding dawning on his gray face. "You think you can survive?" "We hope we can survive," Mayburn corrected Taiho. "There's a difference." The news spread quickly among the observers. They called an emergency meeting with their governments. Taiho let them use the communication system, but he didn't change course or speed. The next day, Zex confronted Taiho on the bridge. "My government demands that you turn over the temporal device. Such technology cannot be allowed to—" "Your government is 70 light-years away," interrupted Taiho, "and we're about to try to save everyone they care about. So I suggest they focus on that and let us do our job." Zex stared at him. "You were chosen for this mission because the Union thought humans didn't understand the concept of sacrifice, that you would go to your deaths in ignorance." "No," said Taiho. "You volunteered us because you thought we didn't understand death. The truth is, we understand it better than anyone. We just refuse to accept it without a fight." As the Prometheus approached its final destination, other ships maintained a safe distance. Through the view screen, the crew could now see the black hole clearly, a perfect circle of absolute darkness surrounded by a swirling storm of light and energy. "Prepare for final approach," ordered Taiho. "Hyun, take us in. Minji, Jun, activate Project Lazarus when we reach the boundary." "Yes, Captain," they all replied. Taiho looked at the faces of his crew, determined, focused, but unafraid. Then he turned to face the view screen again, and the darkness that waited for them. "Let's go make history," he said softly. The Prometheus surged forward, diving toward the edge of forever. The Prometheus approached the edge of no return. Through the view screen, the black hole looked like a perfect circle cut from reality itself. Around it, matter glowed in brilliant colors as it spiraled toward destruction. "Entering the outer radiation zone," announced Hyun from the pilot's seat. His hands moved steadily over the controls. Alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed. "Radiation levels rising," said Songyi, watching her instruments. "Shield capacity at 90%. Taiho stood in the center of the bridge, legs spread to keep his balance as the ship began to shake. The Union observers had gathered in the back, their faces showing a mix of fear and awe. "All stations report," ordered Taiho. "Engines at full power," said Jun. "Communications still clear," said Do-hyun. "For now." "Stabilization array ready for deployment," said Minji. "Project Lazarus standing by." Taiho nodded. "Send the message to Admiral Zahn's fleet." Do-hyun pressed several buttons on his console. "Message sent. Beginning final approach. We'll deploy array at optimal position." The vibrations grew stronger. As the Prometheus pushed deeper into the gravity well, the great swirling disk of matter around the black hole filled their view screen now. "Incredible," whispered Songyi, looking at her readings. "The data we're collecting. No one has ever recorded these conditions up close." "Union fleet confirms receipt of our message," said Do-hyun. "They wish us good luck." Zex stepped forward. "Captain Kim, I must share something. My government has analyzed your Project Lazarus plan. They believe it has merit. They say there is indeed a small chance it might work." Taiho smiled. "A small chance is all we need." The ship shuddered violently as they passed through a particularly dense region of the accretion disk. Warning lights flashed brighter. "Shields at 70%, reported Songyi. "Hull temperature rising." "How much further to deployment position?" asked Taiho. Minji checked her calculations. 3 minutes at current speed. Those 3 minutes felt like hours. The Prometheus groaned and shook as forces beyond its design, specifications battered it from all sides. Twice the artificial gravity flickered, sending everyone floating briefly before it came back online. "There," said Minji, pointing at her screen. "We've reached optimal position for the array." Taiho nodded. "Deploy." Jun pressed a sequence of buttons. Outside the ship, a section of the hull opened. A complex device, about the size of a small car, emerged and detached from the ship. Small thrusters guided it into position. Array deployed, confirmed June. Beginning activation sequence. On the main screen, they could see the array unfold like a metal flower, revealing a glowing blue core. Activation complete, said June. The array is functioning. It should counteract the instability. For a moment, everyone on the bridge was silent. They had done it. The primary mission, the reason they had come, was accomplished. Billions of lives throughout the galaxy would be saved, but their own lives were still very much in danger. We're too close to the event horizon, said Hyun. Gravitational pull is increasing. We need to execute the Lazarus protocol now if we're going to have any chance. Taiho looked at Minji. Dr. Park? Minji nodded. Activating Project Lazarus. She and June worked quickly at their stations. Deep within the ship, the experimental system they had built came to life. Temporal dilation field powering up, said June. We'll have about 8 minutes of protection before the system overloads. Will that be enough time? Asked Taiho. It has to be, said Minji. A strange humming filled the ship as the Lazarus system reached full power. The viewscreen image seemed to stretch and distort. Time is now flowing differently for us compared to the outside universe, explained Minji. From the perspective of the Union fleet, what will be 8 minutes for us might appear as only seconds to them. Hyun's hands flew over the controls. Setting course for the emergency trajectory. This is going to be rough. The Prometheus turned sharply, its engines straining against the immense gravitational pull. The ship was now skimming dangerously close to the event horizon, the point of no return. We're receiving messages from the Union fleet, said Do-hyun, his voice tense. But they're stretched and distorted. I can't make them out. The ship lurched suddenly, throwing everyone against their restraints. Warning lights flashed everywhere. We're being pulled in, shouted Hyun. Engines at 110%. They can't take much more. Minji was working frantically at her station. The temporal field is creating a bubble around us. In theory, it should allow us to... Another violent jolt cut her off. Sparks flew from one of the control panels. Shields failing, warned Songyi. Structural integrity at 60%. Zex and the other observers watched in silent terror. This was beyond anything their species had ever attempted. Taiho gripped the arms of his chair. Hyun, can you get us out of here? The pilot's face was tight with concentration. I'm trying something. Minji's calculations showed a possible path, but it's never been done before. What path? Asked Taiho. Using the black hole's rotation, said Hyun. If we can align perfectly with its spin, we might be able to slingshot around it instead of being pulled in. Like a gravity assist? Asked Taiho. Yes, but about 1,000 times more powerful, said Hyun, and with no room for error. The next few minutes were chaos. The ship's systems flickered and failed one by one as the immense forces tore at them. The hull creaked and groaned like it was about to break apart. Lazarus system failing, called out June. We've got maybe 2 minutes left before collapse. Not enough time, said Hyun. We need at least 3 minutes to complete the slingshot maneuver. Minji suddenly moved to June's station. Reroute all remaining power to the Lazarus system. Everything, except life support and engines. That would mean no shields, no weapons, no... Do it, ordered Taiho. As June worked to reroute the power, the ship grew darker. Only emergency lighting remained. The air grew cold as the temperature control systems went offline. Lazarus system back to full power, reported June. But we're running on empty now. Hyun guided the ship along the precise path needed for their desperate plan. The black hole's pull was now so strong that the ship's frame was bending slightly, under the strain. 30 seconds to optimal position, said Hyun. Lazarus system reaching critical levels, warned June. Through the viewscreen, they could see nothing but distorted stars and the absolute darkness of the black hole's event horizon. They were closer than any ship had ever been, and survived. 10 seconds, said Hyun. Everyone held their breath. Now, shouted Hyun, executing the final part of the maneuver. The ship spun on its axis, using the black hole's own rotation to gain momentum. For a moment that felt like eternity, the Prometheus hung in perfect balance between escape and destruction. Then, With a final burst from its straining engines, the ship shot forward, riding the very edge of the event horizon like a surfer on a wave. "It's working," cried Songyi. "We're moving away from the event horizon." But their victory was short-lived. A massive alert sounded throughout the bridge. "Lazarus system critical failure," said June, his voice tight. "Temporal field collapsing in 10 seconds. "We're not clear yet," said Hyun. "We need more time," Minji moved quickly to the main engineering console. "I can buy us a few more seconds, but I'll have to manually override the safety protocols." "That's too dangerous," said Taeho. Minji looked at him. "It's our only chance." Before anyone could stop her, she entered a series of commands. The failing Lazarus system surged with one last burst of power. "Get us out of here, Hyun," said Minji. "You've got about 30 seconds. The ship accelerated, straining away from the black hole's grasp. The view screen showed the swirling chaos of the accretion disk beginning to fall behind them. 20 seconds, counted June. "Almost there," said Hyun through gritted teeth. 10 seconds. The ship gave one final lurch. "We're clear," shouted Hyun. "We've escaped the primary gravity well." As the words left his mouth, the Lazarus system failed completely. The ship rocked violently, and several systems exploded in showers of sparks. When the chaos settled, Taeho looked around the bridge. Everyone was still alive, though the ship was badly damaged. "Status report," he ordered. "Engines at minimal power," said June. "Life support functioning, most other systems offline." "Communications?" asked Taeho. Do-hyun checked his station. "Barely working, but I'm picking up signals from the Union fleet. They're asking if we're alive." A cheer went up from the crew. They had done the impossible. They had deployed the array that would save the galaxy, and they had escaped from the very edge of a black hole. Zex approached Taeho, his 3 eyes wide with amazement. "In 10,000 years of space travel, my species has never witnessed anything like this." Taeho smiled tiredly. "Humans specialize in doing what others think impossible." As the damaged Prometheus limped away from the black hole, Taeho looked at his brave crew, exhausted but alive. Their journey wasn't over yet. The ship was damaged, they were far from home, and the effects of their close encounter with the black hole were yet to be fully understood. But they had survived, and they had changed the galaxy's understanding of what was possible forever. 3 months passed since the mission at the black hole. In that time, the Galactic Union had declared the human crew of the Prometheus heroes. A grand memorial stood in the center of the Union's capital planet, 6 human figures cast in shining metal facing the stars. Admiral Zahn stood before the Union Council, concluding his speech about bravery and sacrifice. Though the human vessel deployed the stabilization array successfully, all contact was lost as they approached the event horizon. As we all know, nothing can escape a black hole's pull once it crosses that boundary. The crew of the Prometheus gave their lives to save us all. The vast chamber was silent as delegates from all species bowed their heads in respect. The mood was solemn but grateful. The black hole was stable again. Billions of lives had been saved. At the back of the chamber, Ilara, the elder Tyrann, watched, quietly. She had studied humans more than most. Something about their sacrifice bothered her. Not because it wasn't noble, it was, but because it didn't fit what she had learned about humans. "They always look for another way," she whispered to herself. As if answering her thought, alarms suddenly blared throughout the Union headquarters. Red lights flashed. A voice came over the speaker system. "Alert! Unknown vessel detected entering." "The system." Admiral Zahn straightened. "What vessel? Put it on screen." The large display at the front of the chamber lit up. A ship appeared, battered and scorched. Parts of its hull were missing. It moved slowly, limping through space. But even damaged as it was, its shape was unmistakable. "The Prometheus," gasped. Admiral Zahn. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Delegates jumped to their feet, shouting questions. How was this possible? No ship could survive what the Prometheus had faced. At the front of the chamber, a communication officer ran to Admiral Zahn. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the vessel." "Put it through," ordered Zahn. The screen changed to show the bridge of the Prometheus. There stood Captain Taiho Kim. But he looked different. His once black hair was now streaked with gray. Lines marked his face that hadn't been there before. Behind him stood his crew, all showing similar signs of rapid aging. "Greetings, Admiral," said Taiho. "The Prometheus requests permission to dock. Mission accomplished." The Union headquarters scrambled to prepare for the impossible return. Medical teams stood ready as the damaged ship slowly docked. No one knew what condition the humans would be in after their encounter with the black hole. The main airlock of the Prometheus opened with a hiss of air. First through the door was Taiho, walking slowly. Though he had aged years in just months, his back was straight and his eyes clear. Behind him came the rest of the crew, all showing the same signs of advanced aging. Admiral Zahn stepped forward. "Captain Kim, this is impossible." Taiho smiled. "Impossible just means no one has done it before." The humans were taken to the medical center for examination, while engineers studied the Prometheus. What they found astonished them. The ship's hull contained trace particles that had never been seen before. Its computers held data that contradicted several long-held theories about black holes. 3 days later, the Union Council called a special session. The crew of the Prometheus would explain what had happened, how they had survived what no species thought was survivable. The chamber was packed. Every delegate from all 127 species had come to hear the humans speak. Taiho stood at the center of the floor, his crew beside him. "How did you survive?" asked Admiral Zahn, asking the question on everyone's mind. "Project Lazarus," said Taiho, "a temporal dilation field that allowed us to experience time differently than the space around us." Minji stepped forward. Though her hair was now silver instead of black, her eyes still held the same sharp intelligence. "The field gave us a few extra minutes to execute a slingshot maneuver around the black hole, using its own rotation to propel us away. But the time dilation had side effects," added June, gesturing to his aged face. "For the galaxy, 3 months passed. For us, it was more like 20 years. A murmur ran through the crowd. Many delegates looked shocked or confused. "The readings we collected are unlike anything science has ever recorded," said Song Yi. "We have data from closer to a black hole than anyone has ever been before." "And we found something else," said Do-hyun. "The black hole isn't just destroying matter, it's changing it, transforming it into something else. Our readings suggest it might be connected to another part of the universe." The chamber erupted in excited conversation. If true, this would change their understanding of physics forever. Admiral Zahn raised his hands for quiet. "This is remarkable. But I must ask, why did you take such a risk? You knew the chances of survival were minimal." Taiho looked around at his crew before answering. "Because that's what humans do. We push boundaries, we explore, we refuse to accept limitations without testing them first." In the days that followed, the data from the Prometheus changed galactic science forever. Theories that had stood for thousands of years were rewritten. New fields of study opened up, and the standing of humans within the Union rose dramatically. One evening, as Taiho sat in a quiet garden on the Union capital planet, Alara, the Terran elder, joined him. "I suspected you might return," she said. "But even I didn't think you would survive crossing the event horizon itself." Taiho smiled. "We never actually crossed it. We came right to the edge, closer than anyone thought possible, but we found a way to ride its boundary instead of crossing it." "Still, the risk was enormous," said Alara. "Your crew has aged decades in months. You sacrificed years of your lives." "But think of what we gained," said Taiho. "Knowledge, discovery, and we proved something important to the rest of the galaxy." "What's that?" "That impossible is just a word, not a fact." A week later, the Union Council made a historic decision. They created a new protocol. When facing extinction-level threats, humans would be consulted first. Their unique perspective, their willingness to take calculated risks, to try what others deemed impossible, was now seen as one of the galaxy's most valuable resources. On the Prometheus, now docked at the Union space station for extensive repairs, the crew gathered in the mess hall. They looked older, but their eyes still held the same determination and curiosity that had driven them to volunteer for what should have been a suicide mission. "What will you do now?" Hyun asked Taiho. "Return to Earth?" "Eventually," said Taiho. "But first I've been asked to help establish a new Union research center. They want to study our approach to problem solving." "You mean they want to study why humans are crazy enough to fly into black holes?" asked June with a laugh. "Something like that," smiled Taeho Zex, the Zolaxian observer who had been with them on their journey, entered the room. He had requested to remain with the humans, studying them to better understand their species. "I have a message from my government," he said. "They wish to establish a special alliance with Earth. They believe there is much our species can learn from each other." "Tell them we'd be honored," said Taiho. Later, as Taiho stood by a viewport looking out at the stars, he reflected on their journey. They had gone to save the galaxy and had succeeded. But they had done something perhaps even more important. They had shown the Union that boundaries were meant to be tested, that the impossible was often simply the untried. In the distance, he could see ships coming and going from the space station. One of them, he knew, was headed to Earth, carrying news of their survival and their discoveries. He imagined the celebration that would greet them when they finally returned home. But more importantly, he thought about the future. Humanity had proven itself to the galaxy in a way no one could have predicted. The path ahead would be different now. New doors were opening, new possibilities emerging, all because one species had been willing to volunteer for the black hole dive.